Now adjust the sound volume. That's all. When this bell system seal fades out, shut off the projector. Everything will be properly set for your show to begin.
That's no way to answer the phone, Susie.
Hello, Matthew's residence. This is Jimmy. Just a minute, please.
Uncle Bill, Captain Adams wants to talk to you.
Thanks, Jimmy. Hi, Captain. This is Bill. No, we don't usually have ducks answer the phone. That one belongs to Susie. My niece and nephew are visiting me, and I promised to take them on a picnic. Oh? You need that posted today?
If it doesn't stop, there won't be any picnic.
We don't...
Cracker likes it? Yeah, it's great weather for ducks.
Oh, sure. Glad to do it. Bye. Captain Adams wants this poster I've done for him delivered to him at police headquarters today. I'll drop it off on our way to the park. Good thing I got that phone call. If he hadn't reached me, I wouldn't have gotten it to him on time.
I never thought about that, Uncle Bill.
You never thought about what?
What did people do before the telephone was invented? How did they get messages to each other in a hurry?
Well, while we're waiting for the rain to stop, let's see if we can find out by playing make-believe.
Oh, good. That sounds like fun.
Now, here's our friend. We'll call him, Mr. Man. He's going to take us back thousands of years, way before telephones or televisions or Telstar.
He looks a little like you, Uncle Bill.
He looks a little like all of us, Jimmy. You ready, Mr. Man? Man has played many parts during the years he has lived on Earth. So let's make believe we're going back in time.
Thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago?
That's right. When man lived in caves and hunted for their food.
Found a herd of buffalo.
At last, meat for supper.
Run and tell the others to bring weapons, or else supper will run away.
The only way Mr. Caveman knew how to get a message from one place to another was to send a runner. As civilization grew, man's way of life changed. But he still used runners to send messages. The Egyptians used runners. It took 2 days for a Greek runner to bring the news of a great victory.
He is getting tired.
He discovered he could ride horses. The Romans used horses. So did the knights.
That's a Pony Express rider.
That's right. But man wanted to send messages faster than a runner or horse could travel.
He's sending an Indian smoke signal.
Right. But only the simplest messages could be sent this way. And none at all if it rained. He learned to use flashing mirrors by daylight and blinking lights when it was dark.
He couldn't send messages very far that way, could he?
No, Jimmy, he couldn't. But man has always been able to solve his problems by inventing new things.
That's a telegraph message.
Yes. About 125 years ago, Samuel Morse invented the telegraph, a way to send code messages over an electric wire. The code was made by using different clicks for each letter of the alphabet. First message sent over 40 miles of wire was, "What hath God wrought?" The telegraph was, and still is, wonderful. But Mr. Man wanted to send his voice over a distance, to carry on a real conversation. Then in 1876, a man named Alexander Graham Bell found a way. He invented the telephone.
Hey, that's your phone, Uncle Bill. Hello, Matthew's residence. This is Jimmy. Hi, Mom.
Hi.
Yes, we got here before the rain started. Uncle Bill's going to take us on a picnic if it lets up.
Fine.
We're playing make-believe.
I'll tell you about it when we get home.
Good.
Okay, Mom. Bye. What are you doing, Susie?
She wanted to hear the voice going through the wire.
You can't hear voices in the wire.
Well, how does it work? How'd your mother's voice get in the phone?
That's simple. That's funny. I don't know. I never thought about it before. We were talking as if we were in the same room. How does the telephone work, Uncle Bill?
Magic?
No, not magic, Susie, but science. Science of sound waves and electricity.
How do they work?
We'll let Mr. Mann show us. We'll pretend now he's a musician. All sounds come from a movement of the air, back and forth, like waves.
I don't see any waves.
See the string move back and forth?
I have seen strings and rubber bands move back and forth, but I've never seen a sound wave.
Well, you can't really see them, you hear them. But if you could see them, they'd look like this. Different kinds of sounds make different kinds of sound waves. A low sound makes a different wave than a high sound.
Hey, Rudolph, that's the wrong note.
You see, people's voices make sound waves too. When we speak, air from our lungs moves vocal cords like these in our throats.
Hey, Rudolph.
This movement makes sound waves and sends them out of our mouths.
Hey, hey.
When sound waves reach the ear of another person, they make the drum in his ear move back and forth, and he hears the sound the other person is making.
I see. But how do you hear over the telephone?
We're coming to that. When Mr. Mann speaks into the telephone, the flow of electricity in the wires makes it possible for the other person to hear what Mr. Mann is saying, just as quick as a flash.
But how?
Well, when he has dialed his friend, and his friend Rudolph answers, the flow of electricity in the wires connects Mr. Mann's telephone through the telephone building to his friend's phone.
Oh.
Rudolph.
Mr. Mann's vocal cords make sound waves which go into the mouthpiece of the telephone. These sound waves make the electricity flow stronger and weaker, depending on the sound waves his voice makes. Remember now that the flow of electricity is changing from strong to weak as it comes from Mr. Mann's telephone. These changes work on the receiver very much the way sound works on your eardrum. The electricity makes a little metal plate vibrate. This vibration makes sound waves come out of the receiver. And so, in a split second, the person on the other end of the line hears the same words Mr. Mann is speaking. And what he hears sounds just like Mr. Mann's voice.
Rudolph, I said that's the wrong note.
Susie. You shouldn't play around with the telephone. Somebody may be trying to... You see? Somebody was trying to call us. Bill Matthews. Would you repeat that slowly, sir? Well, you must have the wrong number. What number are you calling?
It's Mabel Oval there.
Well, not so loud.
Oh, excuse me. Doesn't Mabel Oval live there?
I'm sorry, but this is 555-3759. I shouldn't lose my temper, even when people roar into the telephone at me.
Always talking. It's a good thing animals don't talk on the telephone.
Say, let's pretend we're at a talking animal circus. Mr. Mann can be the ringmaster,
Sounds like fun.
There we are.
May I draw his whip?
Sure.
Whiskers?
Here. All set, Mr. Man?
Ladies and gentlemen, presenting the greatest, the most sensational talking animal act the world has ever heard. Introducing the lion and the mynah bird.
Miss Myrtle Minor Bird speaking.
How are you?
Please don't roar at me.
What did the lion do wrong, Jimmy?
You don't have to shout into the telephone to be heard.
That's right. Just use your normal speaking voice and speak directly into the mouthpiece.
I'm sorry, Myrtle.
Presenting the impatient squirrel and the sleepy bear.
Watch, Jimmy. When you dial, you should make sure you bring your finger all the way around to the finger stop. Then for each number, let the dial go all the way back by itself. Each number, all the way. Then let go. See?
Yes, sir.
Hello? Hello? Now I wonder who that was. Yeah.
He waited too long.
Right. He waited too long to answer. But if you're the person making the call, you should let the phone ring 8 to 10 times. See? Both of them are disappointed.
And now, the preposterous pachyderms. In other words, elephants.
So like I said, I wanted to invite you to a party.
Smarty? Who are you calling a smarty?
No, I said I'm giving a party at my house.
Mouse? Don't you call me a mouse.
What is the matter, Jimmy?
Hello?
I know. It's important to speak clearly on the phone so the other person can understand what you're saying.
Right again, Jimmy.
And now, for our grand finale, the gossipy piggy and the fed-up fox.
Well, guess who was there? Betty. So I said to her, well, how is it every time I go to a sale, I run into you? It's just the funniest thing. Oh.
Excuse me, lady, but I've been waiting to make an important call for 25 minutes.
But I simply must tell Irma about my new hat. Well, now, as I was saying before I was interrupted,
It's selfish and impolite to hog the phone. Somebody may be waiting to use it or trying to call your house.
Gee, that was fun. I hope nobody's being selfish on Bobby's phone. I'll call him to see if he's coming on the picnic.
Telephone book is very helpful. Our friends are in it, like Robert Martin. Our doctor is in it.
The television repairman, the bicycle shop.
Then in this little book, I write down the numbers of people I call often. You should have one too, Jimmy. It saves a lot of time to keep the phone numbers of people you call often. Like your friend Bobby.
Oh, yes. Hey, look, the sun's out. Now we can go on our picnic.
Hooray!
I'll
I'll try to call Bobby again.
Well, tell him to meet us in front of the police station at 2:30. That way we can drop off the poster for Captain Adams.
All right. Hello, Mrs. Martin. This is Jimmy Matthews. May I please speak to Bobby? Thank you. Hi, Bobby. Listen, we'll meet you in front of the police station at 2:30. Don't forget to bring your ball and glove.
Hi, Tom.
Hi there.
Children, this is Captain Adams.
Hello, Captain Adams.
How are you today?
Fine.
I want to be a policeman when I grow up.
She wants to be everything when she grows up.
Here's the emergency poster you wanted.
Thanks.
I think Jimmy and Susie would like to know how valuable the telephone is in emergencies.
Good. You come inside for a minute and I'll show you. Now, the telephone helps us because it lets us know right away when we're needed and how, when, and where we can help people.
How would I call the police if I needed them?
This poster your uncle made will show you how. We want to use this to show children how to get help. In an emergency, you dial 0 to get the telephone operator. Be sure you hear the dial tone first. Remember?
Yes, sir.
A 0 is the last hole on the dial. Now see? Be sure you bring the dial all the way around to the stop. Then remove your finger and let the dial go back. Now you dial 0 once and the operator will answer.
Then what?
Then you say, "I want a policeman, please," and the operator will connect you with the police station. Now when somebody, like the sergeant here, answers, you tell him who you are, where you are, and why you're calling the police.
Police station, Sergeant Evers.
My Linda's lost.
Oh, that's too bad. May I have your name and address, please?
Mrs. Jane Hoskins.
Mm-hmm.
42 Barton.
And your phone number?
555-1029.
How old is Linda?
5.
5.
Yes.
Where did you see her last?
In our front yard.
And how long has she been missing?
Half hour.
And what was she wearing?
A sort of strawberry pink dress and a yellow cotton sweater.
A pink dress and a yellow sweater. Hmm?
Yes, sir.
All right, Mrs. Hoskins. Don't worry. We'll find her and let you know as soon as we do.
Oh, hurry.
Yes, ma'am. Goodbye.
Thanks, Sergeant. Now see how careful we are to write everything down? Pardon me.
Yes, sir.
Get out an all points bulletin. 5-year-old girl lost. Linda Hoskins. Last seen on Elm Street. Here's a description.
Sarge, this is Officer Jensen, 6th and Elm Street. That's what I'm calling you about. She was all alone, looking in a toy store window. Oh, sure, she's fine.
Good work, Officer Jensen. We'll have a car over to pick her up right away.
See how the telephone helps us do our job? Call Mrs. Hoskins and tell her we found her little girl. Over here at the window, I want to show you something. There it is, the telephone building. In many ways, it ties the community together. When you dial a number, this equipment inside the telephone building automatically connects you with the person you're calling, whether he's across the street or miles and miles away. Thousands and thousands of calls go through here every day.
This is Riley's Dairy. We need 50 pounds of butter.
50 pounds of butter.
And 1 crate of large eggs.
We'll deliver it today.
This is Mrs. Lee, Doctor. When can I bring Tommy in for his checkup?
Let me see. How about Tuesday, 4 o'clock?
That will be fine.
Marletti's Garage, Joe speaking.
This is Les Perkins. My produce truck's broken down. I don't know what's the matter.
Oh, where are you?
Highway 26 near Maple Avenue.
Okay, Les, I'll be right out.
Lena's mother asked me to stay for lunch. May I?
All right, Maria, but be home by 3 o'clock.
I will.
That shipment gone to Plainview yet?
Not yet, Carl. We're loading it now.
Good. Listen, Jess, they just called. They want 3 more cartons of soap.
Okay, Carl.
But telephone service wouldn't be complete without people to handle special calls and emergencies. Let's hear what the operators are saying.
Mr. Hanson, please. Long distance calling. I'm sorry, the line is busy. I'll keep trying and call you. Mr. Marco, I'm ready on your call to Honolulu.
I'll connect you with the fire department.
On your call to Sunnyside, Mr. McCarthy will be back in an hour. Will you talk with anyone else? Thank you.
The fire department needs the telephone as much as we do.
I'm sure of that. Well, thanks a lot, Captain.
Not at all. Thank you bringing the poster. Have fun, everyone.
Goodbye. It's after 2:30. I wonder where Bobby is.
I'm sure you'll be here soon.
Like Quacker.
Jet plane flies a lot higher and faster than Quacker.
Can telephones reach up into the sky?
They can and they do. And even more amazing, men are working with communication satellites that orbit the Earth. These satellites can carry telephone messages and television pictures to and from many different parts of the world.
And outer space?
Yes, Jimmy, outer space too. Man himself has entered space.
All systems go. A-OK.
Why, it's Mr. Man.
Yes. And just think, Jimmy and Susie, someday in the future you may pick up a telephone and soon be talking with your friend, even if he's on the moon.
When do we go, Uncle Bill?
Pretty soon.
Hey, Jimmy! Here he comes. Sorry I'm late, Jimmy. I couldn't find my glove. That's okay, Bobby. Let's go.
It's busy. It's building. New factories are going up with the assurance they carry of increased prosperity. New homes are under command of new families moving in. It's a barometer of confidence in the future of my town. A confidence that comes from knowing its many advantages. The excellent schools, for example, that serve their children. And the playgrounds available for recreation. Comforting to the happy fathers and mothers who live here and call it home. For my town is home in the pleasantest sense of the word. From the early call of the milkman through a day of normal activities, one gets the feeling that this is a community of good neighbors. The kind of a place you'd like to live in, perhaps grow old in. The kind of a place you'd take pride in, that a great many people take pride in. That's my town. What's making it all tick? What's welding it into a going community? Many things, of course. But one of the most essential factors in its growth is communications. Communications provided by the telephone company and designed, among other things, to give my town the means for transacting business, the means for communicating information, for seeking help, for keeping old friends in touch. Yes, communications and the telephone company that provides them are part of every community in America. The welding force that joins them into a nation of neighborhoods, communicating with each other. and with every country of the world. And like my town itself, the telephone company is more than buildings and vehicles, poles and switchboards. It's people. Many people in many places, doing many different jobs. Like the operators who handle telephone calls in my town. Here in the central office, you can feel the pulse of the community. The flashing lights on the switchboard reflect the activity of the town.
Thank you.
It begins to stir in the early hours of the morning.
Your name and number?
It reaches its peak in the rush hours of daytime.
That's Pennsylvania. What place, please? Thank you.
And then settles back for the night. It's the job of the traffic department to handle this changing volume of calls. It has to be ready with enough equipment and enough operators, 24 hours a day, to meet the customer's demands for service. From the earliest days of her training, every operator learns to think of her job in terms of service to the community.
This is information. May I help you?
Yes, I'd like the new number of Wilson's Meat Market, 1191 Sycamore Street, please.
One moment, please. The number is Right 56240.
Right 56240. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Operator.
In addition to supplying information, operators put through all kinds of calls, many of them to out-of-town points near and far. And for each call they handle, they record the facts needed to accurately bill the customer. The calling number, the place called, and length of the conversation are all noted for use by the accounting department. Sometimes, an operator handles calls that are more urgent than others.
Operator?
Operator, there's been a bad accident. 2 cars head-on. Please get a doctor and an ambulance.
Can you give me the address, please?
It's right outside my house. Old Woods Road near Van Dyke. Hurry, please.
Thank you. We'll get help to you as fast as possible.
Thank you.
The telephone operator's tradition of staying on the job in times of disaster is well known. It's a responsibility they willingly accept and take pride in. Whether the call be emergency or routine, the operator performs a service that is vital to the business and social life of every thriving community in the nation. And that certainly fits my town. It's a community on the go. New shopping areas to keep pace with demand. New construction of all kinds. New factories are going up, creating greater job opportunities with all that they hold for my town and its people. Homes are being built to house the increasing population of workers and their families. They all need communications, and the telephone company has to be ready to supply them. Connecting these new telephones is the job of telephone installers. Each morning they gather at the plant work center to get the day's assignments from their installation supervisor.
Hi, Ted.
Hi.
Your first day, huh?
That's right.
Well, I guess these will keep you busy. Better start with this new installation for John Gardner, 406 Melrose. Say, how did things go down at plant school?
Well, I think I learned a lot, but I'll feel better when this first day is over.
Okay, Ted. I'll stop in later and see how you're getting along.
Right. See ya.
Hi.
Hi. This your house?
Yep. Could you tell me something?
Sure, if I can.
Where does this wire go?
Well, you see, this is telephone wire. And it's going to run from your house to the big cable on top of that pole.
How come it's so big on the pole and so little down here?
That cable's got about 100 wires inside of it, and each one of them connects to a phone in somebody's home or office. The cable then travels from pole to pole until it reaches our central office, where all the little wires are connected to switching equipment. The switching equipment completes the phone calls automatically, or sends them to the operator. Then your phones will be ready for service. That is, they will be as soon as I hook them up.
Well, I'm on my way to the store. So long.
So long, son. I'll have them hooked up by the time you get back.
My, it looks just fine.
Your phones are ready, Mrs. Gardner. Right now, you can call anywhere in the world if you want to.
Good.
And here's your new directory. Your name will appear in the next issue. Meantime, people can find you through information.
Well, thank you. It's so nice to have a telephone.
Hi, Ted.
Hi.
How's it going, boy?
Just fine.
Have any trouble on the job?
Nothing special. But I did have a youngster asking me some questions. And they got me thinking. I install phones, and I know all the steps. Well, that's part of my plant training. But where do the other departments come in? I mean, how do they fit in the act?
Well, I guess that's a natural question for a newcomer, Ted. You're curious, and you should be, about how your job fits in with others in the company. Well, it's kind of a big order, Ted. But I can tell you this. All of us in the telephone company are organized to do just one thing. To give people good telephone service. Now, to do that, and do it right, takes a lot of people with a lot of different skills. Now, I know you've been through this at the plant school, but let's just review it. Say there's a new family, like the Gardners here, moved to my town and want telephone service. Chances are someone in the family goes to the telephone office and puts in an order. Or the order could be telephoned in. Either way, it's handled by one of our service representatives in the commercial department. The service rep makes the customer feel at home, gets the name and address, and how the name is to be listed in the directory. You see, she wants to be sure the customer gets complete telephone service. These days, homes have telephones wherever it's convenient. And that's as it should be. They want their extensions where they'll be of most value. It could be indoors, say the bedroom, or outdoors on a terrace. And we installers can be of help. For instance, you'll find that you have lots of chances to suggest locations for telephones while you're working. It's all part of doing a good job. But let's get back to Mrs. Gardner's request for service, right? Now, once the order is placed, commercial goes right to work on it. First off, a copy of the order with all the details is sent to the plant department. There, a clerk assigns the necessary facilities to do the job, including central office lines and outside equipment. Simultaneously, directory, traffic, and accounting people receive identical copies of the order, so they can prepare their records for the new customer. The plant installation copy of that order comes to me, and I assign the work to you fellows each morning. Now, while you were hooking up the line from Mrs. Gardner's phone, the frame man in the central office was connecting it to the switching equipment. That gives us the circuit that makes it possible for Mrs. Gardner to pick up her phone and call to a friend across town, or across the nation. Well, that's part of the story, Ted. Lots more, of course. But maybe it's given you some little background on how a few of the departments work together.
It sure helps, Jack. But boy, I've got a lot to learn, haven't I?
We've all got a lot to learn, Ted.
You never stop learning in this business. And you understand your own job better when you know how other departments operate. For instance, the commercial department. In addition to servicing new customers such as Mrs. Gardner, also handles the payments of the customer's bills. It has the further responsibility of forwarding the names of new subscribers to the printer for the telephone directory. Every name, address, and number is carefully checked and rechecked for absolute accuracy. It is an exacting task every step of the way. As they say, it's something for the book. The book, in this case, being the most widely used volume of the year. Commercial also collects the money from public telephones that serve my town in stores, factories, transportation centers, and even along the highways. Then there are the telephone salesmen. They have the job of calling on business customers and suggesting the type of telephone system that will best serve the customer's business needs. Directory advertising salesmen also call on business customers and show how Yellow Pages advertising can help them. They plan the kind of layouts that attract buyers and boost sales for the advertiser. The service that telephone people give can be as immediate as right now. It can seek and answer the needs of today. It can plan the needs of tomorrow. And the needs of tomorrow are a service responsibility of the engineers. They have the job of looking ahead, of anticipating how and where my town is going to grow, so the telephone plan can be installed efficiently and economically and be ready when the customer needs it. They decide where telephone cable will be installed, how it will be installed, underground or overhead, and how much of it will be needed. Should it be a 200-pair cable or a 400-pair cable? They have to make sure there's enough equipment in the central office to handle the switching of the calls and plan cables for routing long-distance calls. The engineers also work directly with builders in my town to be sure the telephone service will be ready for customers when they move into their new homes.
Houses run $20,000 to $25,000, and I've got the men out working and figure to have them finished by spring.
In other words, you want to be ready for immediate telephone installation when the houses are completed.
Definitely.
Well, here's the situation, Mr. Palmer. We've got enough feeder cable coming up to this area, but we've still got to get our poles and distribution cables in place for wiring to the houses.
I had no idea there was so much involved.
Well, that's why we appreciate this advance notice. You know, some builders don't include us in their plans, and then the new homeowners have to wait for their telephones.
We don't want that to happen here. We want phones available when our houses go up.
You can count on us. We'll be ready.
In just such fashion, telephone planning and construction work go hand in hand as my town grows and expands. Poles are set. Cables strung. Terminals go in. A communication pattern develops that serves the growing needs of my town. And to give my town the top telephone service it needs and expects takes a lot of money. And that's where accounting comes in. It has to keep track of all the money spent and received so that the company may know where it stands financially. All bills and invoices come to accounting for checking. And they keep all the cost records necessary to prepare the company's financial reports. They have charge of the records that document the location, the type, and the size of telephone plant. And here, too, are prepared the paychecks, an event of never-failing interest to every employee of the company. Accounting also prepares and mails the customer's bills. And there's more to that than the mere say-so. An array of data processing equipment handles a customer's bill from the first step of listing the customer's name and address through the successive stages of computing the bill and preparing it for mailing. over town, telephones are bringing people together.
Bradford's Jewelry? May I speak to Mr. Bradford, please?
Thank you, Mrs. Chase. I'll have the order over in about an hour.
Hi. Going to the dance? My town gym. Sure.
Arnold speaking. Why, hello, Pete. How's things in my town?
Things are pretty good in my town. There's a sense of growing prosperity, growing pride, growing happiness. And the telephone company is a grateful participant. Now, we've seen the parts played by the various operating departments, such as traffic, whose operators handle many of the calls. Plant, which installs and maintains the equipment. Engineering, where all the planning and designing are done. Commercial, which is responsible for many customer services. And finally, accounting, where all the financial records are prepared. Working in support of these operating units are the company's staff departments, such as personnel. Personnel helps to develop and train people in all levels of employment. They handle benefit and pension plans, pleasant reminders of earlier days. They also watch over the health of the employees and arrange for medical attention whenever they need it. An equally important staff section is the legal department, which checks all company contracts and represents the company in court actions. Public relations is also one of the company's staff departments. It is largely responsible for keeping the public informed about the company. Its members write news releases for the community newspapers. They also prepare newspaper advertisements that promote various telephone services. And they coordinate activities that deal with radio or television shows. They prepare films and other programs for employee and public groups. And they take part in arranging telephone open houses to which the people of the community are invited. The preparation of the company magazine is also the responsibility of public relations.
Well, Mike, we've had our problems in putting this together, but there have been many excellent comments.
That's the reassuring part of it, Mr. Bolton. Now I think we've reached the point where we need a good story to wrap the whole thing up. Now, I have some ideas I'd like to talk over with you.
Good. Let's see now. The previous articles have covered all phases of our company's operations.
That's correct. And now that we've explained what we do, I think we should show how we fit into the big picture. How we're backed up by AT&T, Western Electric, and the Bell Labs.
AT&T, Western Electric, Bell Telephone Laboratories. Magic names in communications the world over. Let's start with AT&T, the parent company which coordinates the activities and policies of all the companies in the system. Each of the operating companies serves a specific area of the United States and Canada. Each has its own duties and responsibilities, but all work closely with AT&T, which provides advice and assistance whenever needed. Within its own territory, each operating company supplies local and long-distance service. And AT&T, through its long lines department, connects each company with the other, uniting them into an integrated system. Long Lines also connects the Bell system with the thousands of independent telephone companies. In effect, it furnishes the links that make nationwide telephone service possible. It builds and operates the radio relay towers that carry calls across the continent. It supervises the laying of underwater cables that enable people to call across the seas. And although many people aren't aware of it, Long Lines also provides the channels that radio and television broadcasters use for their nationwide networks. Western Electric is an equally important partner of the Bell system. It serves as the system's manufacturing arm. And from its plants throughout the country come the millions and millions of telephones that the Bell companies require to serve a growing nation. Western also produces the vast amounts of cable that are needed to interconnect all these telephones. And it builds and installs the dial switching equipment and switchboards used in most central offices. In addition to manufacturing cable and communication equipment, Western also serves as the supplier for the entire Bell system. This means that the companies not only depend on it for their telephone apparatus, but also their other everyday supplies, such as paper clips, typewriter ribbon, and anything else they need. Naturally, Western Electric doesn't make all these things itself. As a matter of fact, most of the items are purchased from more than 33,000 industrial firms across the country. From its warehouses strategically located over the nation, Western Electric is able to rush communications equipment to any stricken area in times of emergency. This equipment is so standardized that crewmen brought from any operating company of the Bell system can use it without further instruction. This assures efficient and rapid restoration of service. Then there is the extremely important part that both Western Electric and the Bell Telephone Laboratories are playing in building the nation's military defense system. Both have had much to do in the design and construction of such projects as the DEW Line and SAGE, and in the development and manufacture of guided missiles. Bell Telephone Laboratories is the research and development partner in the Bell system. It is one of the largest and most experienced industrial laboratories in the world. And it is uniquely qualified to do the design work for both military and civilian communications equipment. Its job is to provide America with the communications of the future, as it has already designed the communications of the present. The laboratory's modern research centers are staffed by scientists and engineers planning years ahead, searching, designing, seeking new knowledge and new understanding. Their aim is to continually develop better tools and equipment to improve telephone service, and to do it in such a way as to assure efficient and economic operation. The achievements of Bell Laboratories researchers are many, ranging through all branches of the communications field. One of their latest advances in telephone progress is leading to new systems of automatically switching telephone calls. These systems are so radical in design that they promise to bring tomorrow's customers a multitude of almost undreamed of services. The tiny device which will make these electronic switching systems possible is the revolutionary transistor. Invented at the laboratories, the transistor brought Bell scientists one of the 2 Nobel Prizes they have won for discoveries in physics. Though it was primarily developed for the betterment of telephone communications, the versatile transistor now appears in a staggering variety of devices and equipment. It has become an important factor in the growth of many new industries, a development that is welcomed by the telephone company. Welcomed because it is in the pattern of service that is traditional with every phase of telephone operation. From its very beginning, service has been an inseparable part of the telephone story. As inseparable as the telephone company's long and continuing association with the communities of America. The My Towns everywhere who gave it the opportunity to be of service. They have grown together, these cities and villages of America and their telephone companies. Good friends and good neighbors. They share the responsibilities of good citizenship. Telephone people are proud of those responsibilities, both on the job and as individual citizens, helping their communities in their own ways. They are proud of being part of their town's hopes and joys. Proud of being able to further its communications whatever the hour. Proud and happy to be of service.
Across the Hudson River from New York City and westward into the state of New Jersey is the city of Englewood. Englewood could be any one of hundreds of American communities, population 25,000, main street with busy stores, banks, and movie theaters, attractive suburban homes with their neat lawns and their well-groomed look. In size and in the kind of people who live here, Englewood is like many other American towns. And that was one of the reasons it has become the first town in the world to have an unusual kind of telephone service.
Oh, I'll go see who it is.
You finish your coffee, John. I'll answer it. It's probably the mailman. John, it's from Sally. She says the baby has the measles. Oh, dear.
Well, now, measles. That's not so serious. All kids get them sooner or later.
John Warren, you know Ruthie is only 14 months old. Poor little dear. I'm worried.
Well, if you're worried, why don't you call her up? You got her number in that little book of yours. It's just about 8 o'clock in San Francisco. They'll be up.
No, I believe I will.
Go ahead, call her. You'll feel better.
Three, 1, 8, G, A. 5, 2, 3, 6, 8. Are you sure it isn't too early out there?
Oh, no, it's 11 o'clock here. That means it's 8 o'clock out there.
Hello? Sally? Sally, this is Mother.
Simple, wasn't it? She just picked up her telephone and dialed her daughter in San Francisco, California. In a matter of seconds, she is talking with her. Simple, and yet you are seeing the results of many, many years of coordinated effort in research, engineering, and operating experience. It's hard for us to realize today that in the early 1880s, the telephone was considered a newfangled contraption. Boy operators manned the switchboards in those days, and it was an adventure to be able to talk with friends or relatives on the other side of town. The telephone at last was filling a deep human need, the need of people separated from one another to talk with each other. Soon, alert girl operators replaced the boys. New types of instruments were developed, and the telephone grew up with a growing America. The demand for telephone service snowballed. Indeed, the use of the telephone became so tremendous that by the 1920s, dial service was rapidly being introduced to help handle the increased volume of calls. As the calls increased, more operators were needed. More calls to handle meant more jobs to do and more people to fill those jobs. This has been the story all through the development of the telephone. For instance, in the days when we had little or no dial service, the Bell system had 270,000 employees. By the time 70% of the telephones were dialed, there were 600,000 employees, more than twice as many. But the remarkable use of the telephone was only part of the story of change in American life. As villages became towns, and towns became industrial cities, people's interests broadened. Where those early citizens were thrilled to telephone across town, people now wanted to call towns and cities across the nation. Finally, they wanted their voices to span the oceans. And they did. Truly, America had grown up. All of which brings us back to Englewood. From many of Englewood's telephones, you could already dial any one of more than 4 million other telephones in the surrounding territory. A fine example of modern telephone service, and therefore a fine proving ground for this new type of long-distance service. A proving ground to answer such questions as, will customers like the service? Do they find it easy to use? What improvements can be made? This first installation now enables telephone users to dial their own long-distance calls, as well as their local calls and calls to nearby communities. The equipment that makes this service possible is among the most complex that man has ever devised. When you dial a number, the equipment obediently receives the information, stores it up, and remembers it. It searches out an electrical pathway for your call, choosing the one that is most suitable at a given instant. If it finds one pathway blocked, it tries another, and another, and another. If it runs into trouble, it automatically reports the trouble and its probable source. Parts of the equipment connected with other parts exchange information. They do this sometimes by a touch system, such as the blind use in reading Braille. Sometimes it's done with a stream of electrons flowing through space. Sometimes it uses an elaborate system of musical notes, played in chords that are heard and interpreted by a mechanical ear. But even that's not all of it. Keeping track of the details of the call is done automatically too. When you dial a number, holes are punched in a continuous tape representing your telephone number and the number you dial. More holes are punched to show the time when you start talking and when you finish talking and hang up. If you get a busy signal or the number doesn't answer, no charge is made. Since all this information is in the form of tiny holes in a long piece of paper, the meaning of these tiny holes has to be expressed in words and figures. This is done by running the tape through several machines which assemble the information, translate, sort, and summarize it. Figure the length of your call, apply the correct rate, and, you guessed it, type your toll statement. But for the Englewood telephone user, it's as easy as dialing a local call. Remember that number Mrs. Warren looked up in her personal telephone notebook? 318 Garfield 5 2368. The only difference between that and a local number is the 3 digits at the beginning. 318 is the code for the San Francisco area. If her daughter had lived in Chicago, Mrs. Warren would have dialed the code 312 and then the telephone number. Cleveland, 216. Boston, 617. Altogether, more than 80 numbered areas are planned for the United States and parts of Canada. For some time past, area numbers like these have been used by telephone operators in dialing long-distance calls. When the people in the Englewood area with 1- and 2-party lines were given this service, they could dial to 13 of these areas. That meant that more than 11 million telephones could be dialed from Englewood. When will the 11 million be able to dial Englewood? And what about the remaining millions of telephones in the Bell system? The answer lies in the future. But this much we do know. Over the years, we have seen the results of a successful formula. Planned research to anticipate the demands of a growing nation, available resources, plus the continued efforts of many people. This combination has given America steady improvements in telephone service. And the story of long-distance dialing points the way to even better telephone service for you tomorrow.
Frontiers of Science, a series of information films presented as a public service, documenting the latest developments in medicine and science in the space age.
The future can be found in many places. It can be seen reflected in the eyes of those who are privileged to look at it. Here at this Bell telephone exhibit, it can be found in the shape and form and made from the metal and the wire, the time and the effort of those who are privileged to create it. Now I'd like to show you what our recent development, the transistor, may do for future telephone service. First, I'm going to throw this switch and turn back the clock to the days before you could talk on the telephone over distances of, say, several hundred miles. Now, I want you all to listen in while I talk on this telephone. Well, I don't think any of you could really understand what I was saying, but let's throw another switch and start coming back to the present. Now you can hear me clearly over a line that represents the same distance. That's because we now use repeater units containing sound amplifying vacuum tubes to give your voice a boost as it goes across country. Tomorrow we'll still be hearing as well as previously. But look how small this repeater unit is. This smaller, easier to make amplifier was made possible by developing the transistor, a tiny piece of sound amplifying equipment that requires no warm-up time and has an almost indefinite lifespan. Our research people are hard at work finding out what else it may be able to do, where else we may be able to put it to use. This is a business that has always dealt in the future. That's the way Alexander Graham Bell thought of it when the business was started back in 1876.
I was in some haste to invent the telephone, but it has urgent work to do. It talks, sings, and makes you laugh. Quite an abundant work. In my view of the future, the novelty will wear off. The instrument will be behind. It will grow light, convenient, and familiar to every hand. A common tool within the means of every factory, business, every home. And connected to a central switching office which can connect any two subscribers in a matter of seconds. And then I see its lines and poles marching thousands of miles, connecting the head office of every city in the land to the head office of every other city. And then I see, perhaps in the next century, the tiniest, farthest hamlet woven into the wire fabric.
Telephone people must always be looking ahead. It was that way in 1922.
when you might have heard this kind of conversation by some engineers who had the job of looking into the future.
Say, Charlie, got a minute?
Sure. What's on your mind?
Take a look at this chart. What do you make of it?
Well, if we keep on adding customers as we have in the past, and if our customers continue to place more and more calls, with the manual equipment we have in now...
We won't be able to give the kind of service our customers expect from us.
I'll make you a little bet that never happens.
Oh, what's the answer?
You know, that's a question telephone people have been asking themselves for years now.
And finding the answer in a type of telephone service that switched calls automatically. It took the time and energy of many telephone people who made use of what was already known about dial switching systems in developing the new equipment and new techniques which would make this better, faster, automatic service a reality for the people they served. The future had been met before it ever arrived. Today, most telephones are dial. There were problems, sure. Dial is a pretty complicated affair. Ask some of the old-timers. They'll tell you.
Glad to. I can still remember how we sweated it out together, drawing circuits for a dial exchange that could be produced not only on a sheet of tracing cloth, but on an assembly line as well.
As a production supervisor, I know from experience it's tough enough to make a change on a production line that's already in business, let alone starting from scratch to set up a new one for something we'd never made before.
Out in the field, we installation people have always had the problem of installing the new stuff and cutting it into the line without interfering with anyone's service. Our customers like to feel they can use their telephone anytime, and making that possible has always been part of our job.
There was the problem of finding a new spot for the operators who handled the manual switchboards that preceded dial. What happened to the operators? There are thousands more today than there were before dial. More improvements in telephone service mean more calls to handle. More calls mean more jobs to do, and more people to fill those jobs. We've always felt that in the long run, the best equipment we could provide produced the best results, not only for the people we're in business to serve, but for those who help to make that service possible as well. People like Frank Dubrovnik, cable inspector. Mary Jane Holmes, service representative. Eleanor O'Brien, operator. Luke Benson, field representative, each of whom in his own friendly fashion made that service a reality on an ever-increasing basis.
If you have any doubts on that score, ask those of us who pick up our mail at RFD boxes. Since the end of the war, well over 1 million of us have had telephones installed.
The vast spaces of America that represent a living for the farmer present a tremendous problem for anyone with the responsibility of providing telephone service in those places. It used to take a lot of construction work, a lot of telephone poles to bring in a telephone to someone in a rural area. We're still using poles today. Since the end of the war, we put up about 2 million of them. The difference being we now use wire that requires 1 pole for support, where 3 were needed before. How come? Ask the men from our research and manufacturing organizations how come. They're the ones who followed the job from an induction furnace where the test ingot was poured, through the prescribed heat treatment, to the making of the test wire that in time became a red-hot snake of slithering steel racing through a Western Electric wire mill, and eventually turned into the extra-strength telephone line that crosses Dave Baker's pasture. New wire, speedy, power-driven augers that burrow out of the earth a place to set a telephone pole, sharp-tongued wire plows that bite into the ground as if they really enjoyed it and lay special rubber-covered wire, as well as a new way of using power lines as telephone pathways, have stretched the long arm of friendly telephone service to many a friendly farmhouse door. Besides serving as a path for telephone wire and acting as a highway for the newest transcontinental airplanes that fly so high they cannot be seen, only heard, the air above the earth serves as a highway for something else that can be heard but not seen. The only visible sign of these conversations is the radio relay tower they come from, through whose lens pass microwave radio beams, carrying not only the telephone messages you speak, but the radio programs you hear, the television shows you see, to the next tower on a hilltop 25 miles away, which receives the signal and sends it to the next hilltop tower, and so on until its destination is reached. Another communications highway of the present and the future is to be found in coaxial cable. The basic coaxial cable can handle 1,800 telephone conversations at one time, and that's a lot of telephone service. Not to forget television programs, teletypewriter news services, and radio programs. Coaxial cable like this has already crisscrossed the country, pushed past some of our last frontiers, guided by a 20th century type of pioneer who swapped his covered wagon and team of oxen for a diesel-powered cable plow and left in his wake not a wagon trail, but a network of electronic highways. Another frontier in the everlasting campaign to improve service is to be found in the town of Media, Pennsylvania, not far from Philadelphia. It's Monday morning in Media, and Mrs. Douglas of the Hillcrest Avenue Douglases can hardly wait to telephone Philadelphia to order a real bargain she spotted in her Sunday paper. There she goes. It's an out-of-town call, but she dials the number directly without having to reach an operator. One of the most important problems that had to be solved to furnish this service was finding a way of automatically keeping track of how long Mrs. Douglas's conversation lasted, the telephone number she called, and telephone number, so she could be correctly billed. This array of impressive-looking equipment in the central office went into action to do just that. It's not enough for the equipment to remember, it's got to make a record as well. Here at this recorder, the billing information from Mrs. Douglas's call and others from Media is punched out in code on a reel of tape. At an accounting center in Philadelphia, the information is processed by machines which have had such brains and skill that they can translate the coded perforations into a record. Efficient as this equipment is, it's but an early step in the development of an automatic message accounting system. In the laboratories, the men who develop new equipment and the men who will have to build it are always at work, not only improving what has been developed, but creating new things as well. Like the latest crossbar switching system, whose automatic switching of telephone calls has made possible operator toll dialing. However, it's one thing for highly skilled scientists, technicians to develop our equipment in the laboratories, and quite another to mass produce it on a production line.
What goes into it? Where do we get it? How much does it cost? What are the conditions under which it must be handled? What tools will be required for its assembly? What production procedures will be followed? What skills will be required by people employed in this operation? What training will they need in addition to their previous experience? Is adequate test equipment available? What rate of production is indicated by the specifications?
In this case, as in all cases, the combination of Western Electric working with the Bell Laboratories on crossbar switching equipment from the very beginning made it possible for those questions to be answered before they were ever asked, and paved the way for operator toll dialing, a new technique in telephone service that makes it possible for operators to dial long-distance calls directly without going through other operators along the way or at the distant place. That's quite an improvement in long-distance service when you consider that in 1927, if you wanted to make a long-distance call, you picked up your telephone and then something like this took place.
Number, please.
May I have long distance?
One moment, please. This is long distance.
I want to call Chicago. The number is Wabash, 2098.
Thank you. We will call you when ready with Chicago.
The long-distance operator passed the call on to a line operator who found an available line to Chicago, and over it reached an operator at the incoming switchboard for Chicago long-distance calls.
Chicago. Wabash, 2098.
The Chicago operator put the call through to the Wabash central office.
Wabash.
2098.
And finally, the operator was able to ring your party. Time required, about 5 minutes on the average. And in 1927, that was good long-distance service. Today, in many places, with many more on the way, you give your long-distance operator the number, and she calls into action the crossbar dial switching system, which sets in motion the corresponding equipment in Chicago. And the next thing you know, Wabash 2098 is ringing. Time required, about 1 minute. We've come a long way since 1927 because we wanted to come a long way. What's made it tough has been the complicated equipment necessary to give telephone service. When we develop something new, it's a physical impossibility and financially impractical to rip out everything we have in service one day and replace it with all new equipment the next. Besides, who is to tell this man that his call is not so important but that it can wait? Or this girl? The country's telephone service can't be turned off while the telephone company changes over to new models. Wherever you go in the Bell system, from the operators at the other end of your line who take pride in the part they play in furnishing your telephone service, to the construction people who see to it that tomorrow's telephone lines are put in today, you will find telephone people building for the future. The future of the telephone business is bright and rich with promise for the millions of telephone users like yourselves, whose quick acceptance and ready use of each improvement in telephone service has helped make possible an endless chain of accomplishments. What will it be this time? An operator dial call to Cleveland? Or the ballet on Channel 2 by means of coaxial cable? An important call by mobile telephone service to a transcontinental truck on US 1? To a ship putting out to sea? Or to a train racing across country? It has been the faith of the American people who have invested their savings in the Bell system in the present, as well as the desire of telephone men and women everywhere to keep on furnishing more and better telephone service in the future, that makes this story a story without end.
than 75 years ago, a man invented the telephone. His name was Alexander Graham Bell. Everybody knows that. But who knows precisely what Mr. Bell had in mind for his ingenious new device? Who knows?
Homicide. Donegan speaking. Yeah? Be right over.
At the tone, the time will be 5 exactly.
Hello, Mom.
Danny, you're home. Do you think this is her first husband? Oh, Lucia!
Tell me more.
Well, I'm not one to talk, but...
The number you have dialed has been disconnected. This is a recording.
Besides, there's more in life than boys. Oh, I must read you a note I got from Herbie. It'll only take a few minutes. Yes, Daddy. I'll call you later.
Of all the cockeyed times for the phone to ring. All right, I'll be there. I'm coming.
The telephone. Few products of man's ingenuity have been so widely used and misused. Today, everybody knows everything about the telephone. But who knows what Mr. Bell had in mind? Also, what he did not have in mind. Here, for example, is Agatha Fewsmith. She's calling a Mrs. Evans about the local church bazaar. But if you were Mrs. Evans, you'd never know it. For some reason, Agatha can't get to the point. The weather leads to summer colds, and summer colds to that nice new doctor in the church membership. And Mrs. Evans is just confused. What's this all about, anyway? And when is it gonna end? Now, by this time, Mrs. Evans feels trapped, and perhaps even a little bitter about the telephone.
Oh, that woman. Well, I never.
Mr. Bell did not have this in mind. But what he did have in mind is so easily accomplished. All it takes is a little organizing. That makes it easier on you, and it makes for a quicker, more pleasant way of getting things done. Precisely what Mr. Bell had in mind. That's even more important in the big, busy world of business. Yet, in his wildest imagination, Mr. Bell would never have conceived anything like the use salesman Sam Black is making of the telephone.
That's just one important feature, Mr. Reynolds. Now, let's talk about the powertrain. That's right, powertrain. That's the engine, the transmission, the rear axle. Well, sure, every car's got them. But the important thing is this.
Yeah. Sounds real interested, doesn't he? Mr. Bell definitely did not have this in mind. It's unstrategic for two reasons. First of all, you can't really sell a complicated piece of equipment over the telephone. Whatever your product, your prospect has to see its features and see them demonstrated to appreciate them. More important, your prospect has to understand your product's benefits to him before he'll buy. And it's simply too easy to say no over the telephone. In fact, it doesn't take any effort at all. But where does the telephone fit in here? Well, what Mr. Bell had in mind for the telephone was not keeping people apart, but getting them together. using the telephones to establish an opportunity to do a good selling job, or to bring your prospect into the right selling atmosphere. But here's another example of something Mr. Bell would frown on. This energetic young man is Pete Wilson. And believe it or not, he's fairly intelligent, too. He's an air conditioner salesman, and he shrewdly figured out a sales plan. There must be a tremendous concentrated market for air conditioners. All he has to do is cover that market like a blanket. Mr. Bell would approve the determination, but he did not have such a pedestrian approach in mind. Pete has completely overlooked the whole point of Mr. Bell's invention. With time-saving telephone calls, our young salesman can quickly determine his air conditioner market. Who is a potential prospect and who is not. And Pete's ready to concentrate his selling time and energy on real prospects. That's when the telephone can really be an extra sales tool to help any salesman create selling opportunities. For instance, with his telephone and an owner list, a service file, or a registration list, depending on his field, a good salesman can literally ring hundreds of prospect bells right from his own office. And, of course, using the telephone strategically like this is just what Mr. Bell had in mind. Yet, even when the telephone is used strategically, unfortunate things happen that Mr. Bell did not have in mind. For example.
Hello. Mr. Carson, this is Wally Smith, Dependable Life Insurance Company. With that new home of yours, I'm sure you'll want dependable insurance protection.
Not with you, brother.
Another brush off for Wally. And it's really not the telephone's fault. Sure, anyone can see that Wally's actually a nice, friendly guy. But he doesn't sound that way over the telephone. Like a lot of other people, Wally doesn't project his true personality over the telephone. And again, the answer is so simple. Before you make your call, try imagining how you might sound over the telephone.
I'm sure you'll want dependable insurance protection.
And then how you want to sound.
Yes, Mrs. Carson. I'll be glad to drop by and explain it to you.
So, whoever you are, before you make that next call, think a moment. Remember how Agatha ambles on, and make sure you organize your call, even writing down the things you want to talk about before you make the call. Remember, too, that you can't sell a complicated idea or product over the phone. So use the telephone strategically to arrange your selling opportunities. And remember how valuable the telephone can be as a time and work saver when it's also used strategically to create new selling opportunities quickly and easily. And most important of all, remember how easy it is to give the wrong impression over the telephone. So imagine how you might sound to yourself. The chances are your true personality will go out over the telephone just as Mr. Bell had in mind. For he was not only an inventive man, but a man of great vision. And even though his first telephone message was sent quite by accident, Mr. Watson, come here, I want you.
Mr. Bell, I heard you. I heard every word you said distinctly. You said, Mr. Watson, come here, I want you.
Why, so I did.
Oh, it's a wonderful day for you, Mr. Bell. Everything you've worked for, every dream has come true. It works, Mr. Bell, it works.
Yes, I dare say you're right, Watson. Our experiments have opened up a new age of communications. There'll be a day when people will think nothing of conversing through instruments such as we have developed.
You mean as an everyday occurrence?
Well, that's what I had in mind. The day will come when people will think no more of speaking to someone miles away than as if they were in the same room.
Think of its possibilities.
Yes, Watson. I can foresee the day when homes will be linked to other homes. Homes to factories, factories to stores. Cities will be joined to other cities, and nations to other nations.
But tell me how, Mr. Bell. How can you foretell all these wonders?
Well, now really, who would know better than I? Any resemblance between Alexander Graham Bell and Don Amici was strictly intentional.
This was a part of Boston in the 1870s, the age of Longfellow and Emerson and Lowell, of hoop skirts and bustles, of gallantry and sideburns and most fastidious manners known as genteel. The Morse telegraph, just reaching our furthermost boundaries, was a common tool in Boston, the most familiar forerunner of the electric age. But still, this was the gaslight era.
Peter, remember we were reading today about the speed of light and the speed of sound?
Much faster, much faster.
Oh, light is so fast that we see the lightning almost exactly when it happens. But what about the noise it makes, the thunder?
That's a lot slower.
That's right. Thunder, the sound of lightning, comes to us at about 1,000 feet a second. So with a little arithmetic, you can tell from that how far away the lightning is. You know how?
We'd just as soon not know how close it is, eh, Sonny?
How can you tell?
As simple as 1, 2, 3. When the lightning flashes, count the seconds until the thunder comes. A second equals 1,000 feet. There. 1, 2, 3, 4. Peter, 4 seconds away, so...
4 times 1,000.
Good. So the lightning was?
4,000 feet away from me.
Pretty close, that. Very close.
Thunderation. Too dag-nab close for your sincerely Willis J. Walton. That was a real rip snorter. I guess there's one advantage to being deep like those dummies over there. They haven't been scared. Just look at them chattering away.
There are no advantages I can think of to being deaf. There is a special disadvantage, I should say, in being deaf to warnings of danger.
Well, that's one way of looking at it. Better be dumb than deaf is what I say. But I guess they go together, right? Wrong. What did you say?
I took leave to differ with you. I said wrong.
I couldn't hear you. It looked like you said wrong.
That's what I did say. I said wrong, and you read my lips.
I can't read lips. Nobody can. And when you're deaf, you're dumb.
My dear sir, the organs of speech are in no way affected by deafness. The deaf person is mute simply because he cannot hear and hasn't been taught to speak.
A contradiction in terms, sir. A most illogical contradiction. The deaf-mute speech organs may be intact, agreed, but if he can't hear a word, how? How in the name of all that's sensible is he, an idiot, going to learn to say it?
Mr. Walton, my hearing must be failing me. I could have sworn you used the word idiot.
I did. And in many states, the law classifies them as idiots. And that's practical. No speech, no language. And you can't think without language. And you can't undo the work of the Almighty.
The Almighty is far more merciful to the deaf child than we, Mr. Walton.
Than we? What do you mean?
Nature inflicted upon the deaf child but one flaw. One little flaw, imperfect hearing. But we deny him speech by not teaching him to speak. And language by not teaching him to read.
Sentimental balderdash. Monumental poppycock.
Good afternoon, Mr. Walton.
Goodbye. Goodbye, you arithmetic scholar.
He can't hear you, Mr. Walton. Can never hear you. He's deaf. He was born deaf.
Well, for goodness sakes. Who was that with the deaf boy?
Him? Bell's the name. Professor Alexander Graham Bell. Young for a professor, but they say he comes from a family of teachers and writers. Guess he got started early. A Scottish family, the Bells. They settled in Brantford, Canada. They teach people to talk clearly. All kinds of people, stuttering folks, children, and important people, too. Ministers and judges and political leaders. This young Bell's father, it said in the paper, publishes many books that go by thousands all over the world, even to China. Can you imagine teaching people to say their words just right? Bell now, he lectures at the university, and he teaches the deaf to speak with some kind of system his father invented. The deaf can't hear, but there's a deaf young lady here in Boston they say can understand speech very well. That's Miss Mabel Hubbard, daughter of Gardner Green Hubbard. You've heard of Gardner Hubbard, lawyer and street railway man. One of our great families, the Hubbards. Well, they say the way this Miss Hubbard can talk and understand is a wonder. I guess she understands young Professor Bell all right.
If all those endearing young charms which I gaze on so fondly today were to change by tomorrow and fleet in my arms like fairy gifts fading away. Thou wouldst still be adored as this moment thou art. Good evening, sir. Did you know that if we had two pianos here and I struck this G, the G of the second instrument would sound?
I suppose that second hypothetical piano could be made to play sympathetically the whole of Endearing Young Charm. Mabel, darling, I'm going to say a few serious words to this young man. Do you want to stay? I shall do some plain talking.
Stay, Father.
Very well, you stay. Now, Mr. Bell, you listen to me. We've gone into business together, you and I.
Yes?
When you outlined your idea of finding a way to send several more telegraph messages at the same time over one wire, we arranged, without formalities, without contracts, for me to enter into your plans as a partner. Do you remember that?
Of course I remember. You and Mr. Sanders were to supply the costs of the experiment. You want an accountant?
I certainly do.
Father.
You are squandering, or at least mismanaging, the only essential asset we have in this enterprise. Do you know what that is?
I quite fail to follow. If you think for a moment...
Keep your seat, Mr. Bell. The only thing we can't get on without is you. Now, I haven't had detectives following you. It just happens, quite by chance meetings with various acquaintances of mine and admirers of yours around Boston today, that I'm able to follow your activities in some detail. At 9 o'clock, you are lecturing at Boston University.
The power of this apparatus, gentlemen, is to me almost the unsurpassed marvel of nature. This is a formidable piece of machinery, even in the ear of a baby. And yet, the buzz of a gnat, a dried leaf tumbled in the wind, has the power to move it, to make a telegraph to the brain.
By 11 o'clock, you had reached the Fuller School. The school has 3 good teachers now, but you stayed there for 3 hours and had nothing to eat but cake. How you reached the normal school by 3 o'clock, only you know. But there you were, starting a new class of prospective teachers for the deaf. I presume you've been in the laboratory since then.
Oh, yes. Yes, sir, and I must tell you...
Mr. Bell, these are all highly praiseworthy activities. I wouldn't have you drop them forever, but you've gone into business.
I realize that,
Gone into business with Tom Sanders and me to develop this new harmonic telegraph, a highly commercial and probably enriching enterprise. Remember? It seems to me that if you gave your full attention to the telegraph, you'd soon have time and funds for other things, and for work on that obsession of yours, the transmission of speech by telegraph wire.
Oh, yes,
I
sir.
just hope for all of our sakes that you slow down before you break.
I realize that, sir. Please forgive me. I am not well organized, but I came here to tell you something amazing, beyond anything we've foreseen. This is a reed, Mabel, this simple little thing. We tune them, you see. 2 of them, tuned to the same pitch, will vibrate together when electric current is applied to them. While presumably reeds differently tuned on the same line will not react.
He means all reeds will be silent unless they receive impulses from instruments tuned to them.
Exactly. And the same wire, we hope, may be used for many telegraph messages at one time. Now, Tom Watson and I were preparing for a test. I was adjusting this reed, this very reed, in this manner. Watson was in another room operating the transmitting reed when I heard something. It was like nothing ever heard before.
Yes, Al.
I ran to Watson and said, "What happened? What did you do?"
What had he done?
This. Just this. Hear it?
A slight twang, Mabel. A piece of metal vibrating. And so, Mr. Bell, what was the wonderful thing that you heard?
This same sound. Diminished, the murmur of it. This.
Really, Alec?
Don't you see?
Tell us, Alec.
A sound was transmitted. Not a signal, not the clack of a telegraph. This little thing moving over this coil had generated an infinitesimal current, varying, modulated like speech. It came from Watson over there to my reed over here. It duplicated exactly the sound over there in this reed in my hand. So simple.
I must say I'm still at sea.
If Watson's voice had vibrated his reed, I should have heard Watson's voice on my reed.
But you didn't hear it. How could you?
Well, by using a parchment diaphragm, sir. A diaphragm attached to the reed. By a diaphragm, very like the top of this hat.
You'll try it, I suppose?
Of course. Tonight, in an hour. Watson has been working on it all day. All shipshape, Mr. Watson?
All ready, Mr. Bell.
Thank you. Thank you very much. No, Tom?
Yes, sir.
I should say something rather special. What if I can? Well, go to your post, my friend, and listen. Yes. Listen well.
Yes, sir.
Something important. Let us pray that come it may, as come it will for all that. That man to man the world o'er shall brothers be forever. Well, Mr. Watson.
I heard your voice. I'm sure it was your voice. I couldn't make out the words. I couldn't just catch them.
Now, everyone may not know that this first telephone was scientifically correct in principle, and that the original instrument has worked many times since under more favorable conditions. Bell himself couldn't know this at the time. So months of tireless study and rebuilding, endless testing went by. Months went by and winter came before the telephone performed a characteristic service with its first intelligible sentence.
Watson.
Come here, I want you. Say, Mr. Bell. Mr. Bell.
Bell, I heard every word you said distinctly. You were perfectly clear. I recognized your voice. You said, Mr. Watson, come here. I want you.
Well, Mr. Watson, I did want you.
And that's how it happened. The telephone was a fact. But for all the acclaim of science, Bell still faced a skeptical business world that had to be shown the practical uses of the telephone. So he must perforce barnstorm with this great instrument of communication, hide his impatience, prove the obvious. He must have the good Watson serenade across the Hudson to the doubting Thomases of finance. From New Brunswick, New Jersey to New York, Watson serenaded the curious.
I am the invisible Tom Watson.
Everybody hears me. Nobody sees me.
Ahoy! Ahoy, Mr. Watson. Will you oblige us with a song?
All right, all right.
Do not trust him, gentle lady, though his voice be low and sweet. Now the life is in its morning, clouds not this, thy happy lot. Gentle lady, trust him not.
An amusing toy, ladies and gentlemen. I must confess I am a little weary of this circus sideshow phase of my work, a little impatient. I was in some haste to invent the telephone, for it has urgent work to do. Talks, sings, makes you laugh. Quite an entertainment, yes. But I want to see it buckle down and work. In my view of the future, the novelty will wear off. The instrument will be refined. It will grow light, convenient, and familiar to every hand. A common tool within the means of every factory, business, every home, and connected to a central switching office which can connect any two subscribers in a matter of seconds. And then I see its lines and poles marching thousands of miles, connecting the head office of every city in the land to the head office of every other city. And then I see, perhaps in the next century, the tiniest, farthest hamlet woven into the wire fabric. Doctors summoned. Disasters met and overcome.
So that was Bill in 1876.
When I was your age, starting in here at the laboratory, that's what impressed me most about Bill. Having done this great thing right at the start. I used to say that's the way I'll handle my career. However, now that the boy has grown older, you know, I get the same inspiration from the way he has carried on in all directions. The variety of the man's thinking. At 37, to take a case, he developed with two associates the wax phonograph record, financed it with an award from France for telephonic achievement. And all the earnings of the phonograph record patent went to founding the Association to Aid the Deaf. He initiated and extended the National Geographic Society's magazine. Reaches a lot of people now. And then the airplane. When Bell met Glenn Curtis and other aviation pioneers, it was much as your life was worth to back heavier than aircraft. But from that meeting of minds, the association then formed, came new ways of controlling flight. But he never forgot the deaf. He spent 6 years without compensation, taking a national census of the deaf. And it all ties together somehow. Widening horizons for the deaf, widening horizons of the mind, communications, transportation. Yes, you're lucky to be hearing him today. Lucky. He's 74 now.
Gentlemen, young gentlemen, it was suggested when I was invited here that I speak to you, the laboratory's newest, youngest engineers, about the telephone. But to tell you the truth, I am sure that in your technical training you have learned more about the telephone than I ever shall know. Thousands of patents and procedures and devices have been added since last I concerned myself with it. And I must confess that I haven't kept track. The telephone system today is a blend of thousands of minds and ideas. The first telephone also was a blend of many minds. No invention really can belong to one mind alone. Realize, gentlemen, there are no soloists, no prima donnas in science or engineering. One cannot learn enough alone. And I think it is this interdependence and the realization of it that tends to make science virtuous and not evil, harmonious and not discordant. Sometimes a junior scientist has fixed me with a jaundiced eye and charged, your generation has done it all. Everything is invented, finished. To this I say, I say it to you. As long as man suffers and wants and wonders, science's work is hardly begun. No doubt, some young scientist at this moment is dreaming a dream or writing an equation which, within your lifetime, will tap some source of universal power and dwarf all our engines and dynamos. What should you work upon in the laboratory of the shop? Well, my ideas are limited. Such as they are, I do not hoard them. I take the liberty of offering a few examples. Years ago, using a substance whose resistance changes according to the light that falls upon it, I managed to telephone for a short distance without wires along a beam of sunlight. Perhaps there is for you to find a way to make the light that passes through motion picture film reproduce the voice with clarity and range. Further, I suggest that disasters such as the Titanic encountered in the North Atlantic are unnecessary. There is a means, if you can but find it, of utilizing the echo principle, so that a ship's bridge may see or feel or hear an iceberg in time to change a ship's course. Now, I give you one of my failures to ponder. It has been very dear to me throughout my life. Before the telephone, I tried to build a device to record the human voice in visual and readable symbols. This, if you succeed, can have several practical applications. The immediate one will immeasurably benefit the deaf. You will understand why this means so much to me. By profession, by personal wish and instinct, I have always been a teacher of the deaf. This, then, is an assignment from me to you. A rather special thing in the greater picture of science. But, young gentlemen, I toss you that brand with this final word. Do not neglect those obscure corners where men work to discover the unknown, to prove the intangible. For here is dawn coming up. Here is tomorrow.
Many scientific minds working together in many places have since brought forth much that Bell's prophetic vision foresaw. The motion picture was given a voice. Radio and television were perfected. Life-saving mechanisms of sonar and radar were designed. They have succeeded, too, as he hoped they would, in turning spoken words into visible symbols that deaf children can learn to read as the words are spoken. In the laboratories that now bear his name, Bell's scientific heirs have taken a leading part over the years in the research that made all these things possible. Yet these are but eddies in the main channel of telephone research, as step by step we move toward the realization of Bell's early dream. His dream of a day when anyone, anywhere, can talk clearly and at a moment's notice with anyone, anywhere else.
And let us pray that come it may, as come it will for all that man to man the world o'er shall brothers be for all that.